Well, I think
Yeah.
it's the whole point of all of a sudden, I'm forced into teaching in a way that I've never been trained to teach before. And I've got to get it right
Yeah.
because these are children's lives at stake, right? Because eventually this pandemic will pass. And if you're a teacher who's cognitive of, oh my God, how is this going to impact Sarita 5 years from now? I mean, think about the little ones who are kindergartners and first
Yeah.
graders, and they're just learning to read. And all of a sudden that got interrupted. All of a
Mm.
sudden that got interrupted. I ran into a couple of my students outside the school, even over the summer. And one of my former kindergartners, all she said was, when are we going back to school? I
Oh.
want to finish learning to read.
Oh.
And it's heartbreaking because that's all she wants to do. She wants to learn how to read. So I
Right.
think for my staff, it was learning how to better support them was something I had to learn how to do, and yet still hold a bar of expectation and standards, and yet be understanding when I needed to be understanding and supportive in a way that maybe I wasn't before.
Hmm.
So that's that reflective part for me. Um, but as a teacher, I had to also, I saw some very strong teachers struggling
Mm.
because now I've got to use technology as the base for how I teach children. And technology is not my thing.
Mm.
You put me in a classroom with children, I'm going to teach them to read, they're going to write, they're going to know their math. But now I've got to do that using this little thing called a laptop. And all of a sudden, their world is turned upside down. So they're beating themselves up more because it's not what they know what their kids should be able to do and would be able to do had they been in that
Hmm.
classroom. And they
Right.
recognize that it's their learning curve that's holding them back. And it's frustrating and it's overwhelming.
Right. And everyone wants to be good at their job, right? I think
Yeah.
this is why this conversation, I'm so glad that we're able to create the space for this conversation to have, because I think what dominates the airway is a very black and white narrative of, if the teacher can't get it together, then it's because they don't want to teach. I mean, to hear the nuance of how much anxiety the teachers are experiencing
Oh,
because
yeah.
they want to do this well, and yet the learning curve can be so steep for some of the veterans, some of the best teachers in the district.
Mm-hmm.
Is so powerful and so inspiring to hear. And also it must be challenging for you as a leader.
Yes, I think it was very much more so in the beginning, because I
Mm-hmm.
think now it's about managing chunks, right?
Mm.
You go back to strategies that you know as a leader that work, right? So it's, I've got to manage these chunks and
Mm-hmm.
help my staff manage these chunks and be sure to make sure when they're doing a great job that they know it. Like, I have staff that's going way above and beyond. They're getting up early in the morning. They're pulling small reading groups for some of our most struggling readers
Wow.
outside the scope of their teaching hours,
Wow.
because they understand if we don't give this to them, they are going to continue to remain behind the eight ball.
Wow.
So there, there's plenty of my staff that are going above and beyond. And I give them kudos because they will acknowledge if it's the technology, right? This is
Right.
new. I'm struggling. It's hard. And then when you have students that have more need, who need that face to face, who need that person to person, and we just can't do it right now, you
Right.
know. Um,
Right.
and so, how do I best help them? And then
Right.
it's the whole new level of partnerships with parents. The partnership with parents,
Exactly where we'd like to go next. Yes.
totally different, totally
Yeah.
different than it's ever been. And that's a
Yeah.
shift. That's a shift.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit of what are some of the, I mean, first of all, I mean, this is, you and I spoke about this. Of being a principal, you're not just a principal to the student. You're a principal to your school leaders, you're a principal, your teachers, you are, also answers to the district and the standards and the state. And you also have your caregivers, and that you're pulling so many different directions. Do you mind sharing with us, like, what are some of the challenges the families that you work with face in the transition to remote learning, both inside and outside of the classroom, that you have seen the last 8 months?
Well, I think it's a matter of many of our families are those frontline essential workers. So
Mm-hmm.
they don't have the privilege of being able to be home. They don't have
Yeah.
the privilege of, you know, I'm going to stay home while Sarita is in school and then I'll go to work. They have to go to work too. So they have to now find someone somewhere for Sarita to be
Mm.
while they have to go to work. Because what does parents are being put in the position of, do I work so I can feed my children and have a roof over our heads? Or do I stay home to make sure Sarita's getting her education? I
Mm.
mean, that's a hard
That's
space to
real.
be in as a parent, right?
Yeah.
But what we did find out was even after um, the initial pandemic, I think just shocked everybody, right? So March,
Mm-hmm.
May, June, people were kind of just shocked, figuring like nobody kind of knew what was going on, and we were just trying to make a way. But I think what is a norm for a lot of our families is we figure out how to make a way out of no way, right?
Mm.
We learn to make a way out of no way. And we had many more families who opted to stay remote when we came back to school, even this fall, a much higher number than I anticipated. I really thought a lot of our families would send more of their children back to school. And they said, no, my child's safety is priority, and I'm going to figure out what I need to do. So when I heard that from our families, it was like, okay, the one thing we have to make sure we do to ensure equity is provide every single one of our students with excellent instruction. That's our job. Make sure they're getting excellent instruction. And what does that look like now in a remote setting? What does
Mm-hmm.
that look like? We cannot take this square peg and put it in the circle. It's not going to work. We have to stop trying to bring those brick and mortar practices into remote, and we're going to have to figure out how to get this remote right. What are other schools doing? What are other teachers doing? And I will say, kudos to my staff again, because they're doing that hard work of figuring it out, willing to plan, willing to, what do my students need? Because, working with Dr. Caselius, and it's always what is best for these students? What's best for our students? And what do we need to do to ensure that they're getting what they need so they can access their education? And it's constantly evolving. And there is no one set way. Nobody has a blueprint on this. I've got families who they don't have anyone to send their children to. Their children go with them to work. And so you
Mm.
have a little kid, they're on their laptop and it's doing this all day. But you know what? They're there. They're showing up. And then we have families that are saying, I can't put her on right now, but can you make sure that the work is in there, and I will make sure that it gets done. So we have to make sure we're not setting up procedures and practices and rules and policies that punish students who are in those situations. It's just not a black and white situation. And it makes you stop and say, was it ever just a black and white situation? Was it ever?
Right.
We were just wedded to the rules, wedded to
Right.
the policies, and not thinking about the needs of the students and the families. And
Yeah.
so that first, especially those first 2 weeks of school, we were just doing check-ins every other night with families. Jump on this Zoom. How is it going? What do you need? Give us some feedback. What is it? And we're starting now a Wednesday help desk. So parents can call in, and there are teachers available on Wednesday just to answer their questions all day long during school. So parents can call at a time when it's convenient for them, find out what's going on, because this level of partnering with families has to be so different. And so we get phone calls. The parents are beyond themselves because the Wi-Fi is not working. They're beyond
Right.
themselves because they can't log in. Something's wrong with the Chromebook. And we have to talk them off the ledge. It's okay. It's okay. Your child's not going to be punished, or there won't be a consequence because she's not in that class right now. We will let the teacher know. We will work with you. And I think it's forcing everybody to rethink those relationships.
Do you think that it makes a relationship stronger?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
how do you think this would inform how you work with caregivers after all the students come back to the building? What do you
Well,
think are
that's the
some of the
question.
things that
Will
you
they
would
all come
employ?
back to the building? That's the question.
Yeah,
Will they all come back? See, I think there's an assumption that when things eventually, what's normal going to look
right,
like in another year or two? There
right.
may be some families that say, no, my child has thrived in remote. I
Mm,
personally have a 10-year-old. He is thriving in remote,
hmm.
thriving. The little academic person I knew was in him is coming out because of all the
That's
distractions
incredible.
of school anymore. He doesn't
Yeah.
have it. And we see it with some of our own students. We have parents who call us and they say, I'm sorry. You were trying to tell me how my child was acting, and I thought it was you all. And I know I told you off, I cussed you out, I said X, Y, and Z, but I'm home with my child now and I see it, and I need you to help me. And we were
Right.
like, okay. So now we're giving them teacher techniques of how to work with their child, because you can't
Right.
go into punish mode. Children,
Right.
they don't want to be home anymore with their parents all day, and their parents want to be home with them. School is an escape for them too.
Right.
It's just as much of an escape for them. Parents, I mean, they were going to work, but it was still time. But now
Yeah.
we recognize how much actual time children spend
Right.
at school.
Right.
You had kids who spent 40 hours a week away from home
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
week.
I mean, and a great example you share is, if you don't mind me sharing, you said you have caregivers who are foster parents that
Mm-hmm.
have several foster children at home. That, like, this is like three, four, sometimes, five kids on remote learning, completely different from what they have signed up for. So when they sign the dotted
Absolutely.
line to be, a caregiver to children that have had trauma that need extra support, and
Yep.
to hear you kind of say like the relationship with the teacher has been something that has to be rethought. It is just, I think that again is, missing in the headlines in the news. I feel like people are just not, I think people want to kind of pin the two sides against each other, right? It's
Right.
either the caregiver's needs or the teacher's needs. They don't hear the stories of, just like what you had mentioned, the teachers and the caregivers coming together and say, hey, we got this together. What do we need to do? What can I support
Absolutely.
you on? And how do I support you? That's incredible. And of course, I have to, for sure ask you, right? We're partners of the charter school. And then I see, also the King's principal is on here too. Can you tell us a little bit of like the roles of partners, and I think, for sure Friends of the Children have played in the last 8 months that's been helpful to you and your students?
Well, I will say that I probably started working with Friends of the Children. It's been more than the years I have here at the Trotter. When I was at the
Hmm.
Irving is when I was introduced to Friends of the Children. Um, and that was eons ago. But
That's right. Some of those kids are now like adults now.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's when I was in middle school.
Yeah.
And I will say, I wish that we had a program like this for every child in the district,
Mm,
where there was a mentor assigned to every family,
mm,
so that that family had that liaison, had that connection. Because if I have to work, if I have 3 and 4 children, and I have to work 2 and 3 jobs, Boston is not a cheap city to live in, and everybody doesn't qualify for reduced or subsidized housing. So there are some parents who really have to hustle and work in order to provide a roof, in order to provide food, even in this pandemic. And to have someone who can help me be the connection, talk to my child's school, make sure my child's doing what they're supposed to do, is a blessing. And, there's just not enough resources to go around for the need. I
hmm.
look at some of my little ones that are working with friends, and it's so funny because you see them on the Zoom. How's it going? Have you checked in with so and so? Oh yeah. Where's your work? Oh, I'm gonna have to give so and so a call. We're gonna have to make sure you get it together and you get your stuff. No, I'm good, Miss Thomas. I'm gonna make sure it gets done because there's accountability there, and they want to be accountable. They
Right.
want to be accountable, and they want to do great work. And I love how the friends have helped us help the students stay accountable, right?
That's so
And
great to
stay
hear.
focused on their academics
Yeah.
and just to keep the participation, because if they don't show up, we can't do this job without them showing up. They got to show up some of the time. Maybe they can't sit on in front of in front of their Zoom for the bulk of the day, but we need them to show up for those essential times.
Right.
And this is where your program becomes essential, because then those type of individual plans can be designed for the student, and it doesn't
Right.
become another thing the teacher has to do,
Mm.
because now I have someone who can work with us outside of the teacher to say, well, when should Sarita be on? Can you all figure that out? And then I can work that out with the parent for you, so we can make sure she's getting credit for being at school, and she's getting credit for the work that she's producing as well. And she's working to build her competence at her grade level.
Right. And I, from conversations that I've had with some of our mentors, I know that some of the teachers have gone as far as inviting our mentors into the classrooms, so
Mm-hmm.
then they can still continue to have the classroom present, working with the kids that they're working with. They might even be in a waiting room or a breakout room on their own, so then they get one-on-one instructional time.
Absolutely.
A lot of this teacher kind of tapping, the mentor and say, hey, I haven't seen so-and-so today. Do you mind checking in? And then all of this is really, again, in the partnership, right? I think you said it best when we had this conversation earlier. Nobody can do this alone. And I
That's
think
right.
if there's anything that this time shows us, is that teachers, partners, school leaders, caregivers, and students are all one team. And the kids
Yes.
are right in the middle. Everything that we do has got to be for the best interest of the kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like we still have some children who have not come to pick up their school supply bags. And it's
Mm.
like, okay, some parents are like, I don't have a way to get there. My child
Mm.
takes a bus to school. I don't have a way to get there. So it's like, okay, so we're rounding up volunteers so that we have one Saturday where we just have a slew of volunteers are going to go drop bags off to children because they need their
Right.
materials. They need
Right.
their materials to really interact and get the most out of it. And how do we help parents get there?
Mm-hmm.
We have families. I know Grace was on the call earlier. She's the
Mm-hmm.
principal over at the King. She has a phenomenal woman who works over there with her, and her collaboration, even with the Y, helping us and making sure that we're feeding our families,
Mm.
because while there are many sites for families to go to for food Monday through Friday, it's those weekends that get hard,
That's
right?
right.
It's those weekends that get hard. And we've got partners out there working with us to make sure food is getting to those families.
Mm.
So it's a constant need. It's a
Mm.
constant of something that needs to be done. But we try to work out establishing with our families. We don't want you to be prideful and not tell us that you need help.
Mm.
I don't want that. And part of
Right.
that is developing a relationship with those families. How do we make them feel comfortable enough to know everybody needs help sometimes? And
Right.
it's okay, and you don't have to talk to 5 and 6 and 7 people and tell them your story. We got one person here that you
Mm-hmm.
connect to, and that person's going to make sure you get what you need.
That's great. That's great. Well, we're nearing the end. We have roughly about 10 minutes left. I do have kind of two questions that I think I'd love Sarita to answer. But for our guests here, if you have any questions, this would be the time to pop it into the chat box, just so that, we have this amazing leader and while we have her time to get that answer. The question I have for you, Sarita, is, we're now 8 months into this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And, the numbers are ticking up, right? I mean, everyone's scared. The infection rate is the highest, since the summer. All of these things, even among all of that, what are you the most proud of your students?
I will say we have almost 400 students at the Trotter. And sometimes, we have a system within the system that alerts us when we have children who have excessive absences that we need to
Mm-hmm.
check in on. And so sometimes you can get really focused on that and you're constantly almost troubleshooting and putting out fires. And one day we decided not to look at it from this deficit model, right? We decided to go in and look at how many students are actually showing up every day. Maybe they've missed 1 or 2 days of school, but other than that, they show up every day. And we had almost 300 students who have shown up every single day, maybe missed 1 or 2 days of school. And I think it's remembering to celebrate those moments,
Mm.
remembering to celebrate those students. I give so many kudos to my teachers. They're sending students Amazon packages in the mail because you got student of the week. And so the teacher is spending their money sending Amazon packages to the children. And during the Zoom, you see the kid get their mail and they're so excited
Oh,
because they were at school every day. They were participating, they completed, because we know this is not easy for them. So for
right.
me, those are the moments that you're really proud of because you try to keep some resemblance of that joy that you had in school, the fun that you had. Um, and that my teachers some of my teachers go above and beyond. They were sending pizza to children's houses. Like they had won a pizza party so they could have pizza with their little sister because
Oh,
they had done the best job in XYZ or their group had. So it's remembering to have those moments and have those opportunities and celebrating them.
that's amazing. That's great. And the last question I have is, if your students are watching this conversation, what do you want to say to them?
Uh, well, I see my students, we're in classes, we do observations, and you try to go in, and discreetly and not interrupt. Um, but it's being able to tell them how much you miss them, tell them how proud you are of them. I tell them that all the time. Like, I'm so proud of you. You're here, you're pushing through, you're not giving up, you're doing your best. And that's what we want to keep pushing them for. Keep doing your best because things are going to happen to us in life. And
Mm.
we have to learn how to deal with it. We have to learn how to not let it scare us to the point where it paralyzes us,
Mm.
right? And from kindergarten through 8th grade, it's what's going on, how
Mhm.
can I help you? What do you need? Because we're about to have a community meeting with our middle school kids. They're typical middle schoolers. Everybody cameras off. We don't know if they're behind those cameras or not. Um, engagement is a challenge. I'm just going to call it engagement is a challenge for my older kids. Um, but it's something we got to work through. And how do we
Right.
get them there? But I can't figure that out on my own. I got to talk to them. They got to tell
Yeah.
me what's missing. They got to
Yeah.
talk to me. Do we got to modify their schedule? What do we need to do? Because at the end of
Yeah.
the day, it's about developing their competence so they
Mm.
have what they need to move to the next grade. And what do
Yeah.
they need us to do to make that possible for them? So the conversations are very different,
Yeah.
with the little ones and the little 4 and the 5-year-olds and the 3-year-olds. They had, you go to their events. My drama teacher is amazing. She did sock puppets and they did little shows and they were so excited to do it. And they were so excited to have us there and watch and say, oh my God, that's amazing. We're getting ready for a talent show, and our kids showcase their talent. And, yes, we're tired on Friday. Yes, we're tired. Yes, on Friday, we do want to just sit down and have a drink. But at 6 o'clock, it's showtime because these children have been practicing.
Oh my
And
God.
we got to sit back on that Zoom and watch them sing and dance and do their poetry and their magic tricks.
That's amazing.
You
I
know,
haven't gotten my invitation yet. I want to come to the talent
oh, yes,
show.
you will. You will. Please. If I'm there, everybody's there. That's right.
Yeah,
We're going to share in
that's
this
right.
moment together.
I think, what you said, it's such a great reminder too, because this is not the only thing in their life that's going to throw them off of the plan that they have.
That's
Right?
right.
It's not the only crisis that they're ever going. It's not the last crisis they're going to face. And how do you learn from this? How do you stay resilient? And how do you continue to show up and do your best every day? That is just, I hope that they do hear it and that they feel your love every single day. And, I was with a friend of mine the other day whose kid is in kindergarten, and she is struggling to, do this math or this reading with her kid. And her kid just looked at her mom and go, Mom, I miss my teacher. And I think this is, I hope that we remember that in whatever
Yes.
iteration of education looks like from this. And we're just so proud to be your partner, and hope that we will, and just know that we'll continue to show up for you and continue to show up for your students.
I appreciate it. And I think this is the year of partnerships.
That's right.
You really see what partnerships are made of and how powerful they can be and need to be.
Yeah,
So we're very
absolutely.
grateful to have you guys on board with us.
Thank you. I'm not seeing, are there any questions from the guests with the kind of 3 or 4 minutes that we have while we have Sarita on the line? I don't see any at the moment. I think this has been such a great conversation.
Like 8th graders, just like middle school.
Are y'all behind the name?
Yeah, is anybody out there? Is anybody really out there?
Are you listening?
Okay, I see Marvin. Thank you, Marvin. Is anybody there? Are you all really there? Hi, Grace.
Hi, Miss Coleman.
Hi, thank you. Can I see some faces? Can I get a wave? And I know that I haven't just been in a conversation with Miss Chin all this time.
just the two of us. That's Please. It. We're the only people just chatting along.
Such is the challenge of remote and Zoom.
I know. Well, it's